Alright guys, I am back again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days 2 on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my standard format Dark States Favrneel deck. So version 1 is everything through the first additional card pass, so that's up through DZ Booster 5. However, this deck does not use any cards from the DLC, so you can play this entirely with cards from the base game. And this is the upgraded version of the Favrneel deck that I was playing in Dear Days 1, that now focuses on his new upgraded form, Favrneel Rheingold, which, just like Graham Grace Sieg before in my previous deck profile, Rheingold is a card that was introduced in the physical card game in DZ Booster 6. However, it was introduced in this game just as part of the promo pack. So you can get that new Favrneel form in the base game. You don't have to buy the second additional card pass in order to get the DZ Booster 6 DLC in order to play it. But anyway, this deck pretty much plays very similarly to how it did before. You still want to focus on getting the 13 grades into your soul in order to be able to restand your Vanguard. However, the deck has received quite a nice boost to its offense. You can have your rear guard columns hit for much better numbers now. So, while the deck does still struggle in the card advantage department, it definitely can hit harder than it could before. So, a very welcome upgrade. So, anyway, as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So starting first with the ride deck, I am using the same ride deck as I was in Dear Days 1, kind of the scrap together ride deck, since Favrneel is one of the standalone boss units. So for our grade 0 starter, we do have Uncanny Burning. So when it's wrote upon, if you want second, draw a card, same old D-Series starter skill. So this deck absolutely does want to go first. Your big pop-off turn is turn 4 in this deck, and you do not have the defensive power to play the long game, so you definitely want to hit that as soon as possible, so going first does help. Next up for the grade 1, we have Flaming Pony. So he has an activate ability when he's in your soul that says you can bind this card to soul charge 2. So this ability is just a nice way to build up your soul. You got to get 13 grades into your soul, so the combined total grades of all the cards in your soul has to add up to 13. So this card is just a grade 1, so this ability will remove itself and let you soul charge 2. So as long as you soul charge at least one grade 1, you'll be breaking even. But obviously the hope is that you'll be soul charging 2 higher grade cards than this in order to increase the grade count in your soul. Ideally 2 grade 3s. So there is that RNG factor there. Of course, there is the chance you can soul charge, 2 triggers and get actually less grades in your soul than when you started. But most of the time you will end up with more than just the single grade this card was. So just a nice way to increase that grade count. So next for the grade 2, we have Squalid Freaks. So he has a continuous ability when he's in your soul that says if you did not ride this turn, this card gets grade plus 2. So he can count as a grade 4 in your soul if you did not ride that turn, which this deck's whole thing is not riding anymore after you get to your main boss unit. So from turn 4 onward, this ability should be active most of the time. So again, just makes it easy to hit that 13 grades. And having this one in the ride deck does guarantee that it'll already be set up in your soul ready to go. So turning into a grade 4 is very helpful. And then he also has his auto ability that's also active when he's in your soul. That says when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard attacks, if you did not ride this turn, you can bind this card and all of your front row units get power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is another power up ability. You can bind it out of your soul to power up your entire front row by 5k. So, again, that will be taking a grade 4 card out of your soul, so be mindful not to, drop yourself under the 13 grades that you need in doing that. But we are running some extra copies of this card in the main deck as well, so if you could set up multiple copies of this in the soul, getting rid of one shouldn't hurt you too bad. So, it's just a nice way to gain a little extra offense. And this ability can stack as well if you do end up with multiple copies in your soul that you're willing to lose. You can bind more than one of them in the same attack in order to power up your front row by even more. So just a helpful card in setting up your resources and also boosting your offense. So then lastly for the grade 3, we have Purgatory Dragon Deity Favrneel. So he has this continuous skill that says you may only have up to one Purgatory Dragon Deity Favrneel in your deck. So this is the only copy of this card you are allowed to run. We cannot run any extra copies of it in the main deck, even though it does have the Persona Ride icon. You cannot actually do a normal Persona Ride with this card alone, since you're only allowed to run the one copy. Then he has 3 auto abilities, first of which says at the beginning of your main phase, your opponent chooses one of their rear guards, retires it, and if you did not ride this turn, this unit gets power plus 10,000, critical plus 1. So just a free -1 to your opponent every turn. Your opponent does get to choose which rear guard is taken out, but it's still a minus to them regardless of what they pick. And then again, it can also gain an extra 10k and a crit if you did not ride that turn. So actually with the way this deck works now, most of the time you actually shouldn't be using that part of this skill, because hopefully you would have already ridden into Rheingold by turn 4, which is the point at which this skill would be active. So it's a fallback if you don't manage to get Rheingold into play. You still can power up your Vanguard by that extra 10k and gain a crit, but ideally that second part of this skill will never actually see any use. So then he has a second auto ability that says when your opponent's rear guard is retired during your turn, you can put a card from hand into soul and draw a card. So obviously this ability can be triggered by his first auto ability, letting you put a card from hand to soul and draw a new one. So it is a +/-0 to you, but it does let you get another card into your soul. Ideally a copy of Rheingold. If you have drawn into one at that point, you would shove Rheingold from your hand into soul, since that's where we want him in order to use one of his key abilities. So this can help fill up that soul, get more grades in there, can set up your Rheingold play for later. Just helpful all around. And it can also be triggered from some of the other abilities we have in this deck as well, since we do have some other cards that can retire one of your opponent's rear guards. It can also work if you just attack into one of their rear guards and the attack hits and they're retired that way. It'll still trigger this ability in that case too. So overall, just a helpful skill. And then he has his last auto ability, which is his main ability, that says once per turn at the end of the battle this unit attacked, if the sum of the grades of Dark States cards in your soul is 13 or more, you can Counterblast 2 to stand this unit, and this unit gets drive -1 until end of turn. So he can restand himself if you have the 13 grades set up into your soul. It is a Counterblast 2, which is kind of a steep cost, but you get an extra drive check out of it since he only loses 1 drive. So it's a Counterblast 2 for an extra attack and a +1 overall, and of course that extra trigger chance. So value-wise, it's not bad overall. You just gotta be mindful of those resources. Of course, the main thing with this ability is getting the 13 grades into your soul set up, since if you don't manage to pull that off, you can't use this ability at all. Which, again, this ability should only be used on turn 3, because hopefully you'll be into Rheingold on turn 4. So it is kind of hit or miss whether you can get the 13 grades set up by turn 3. It's definitely possible, but it's not the most consistent thing in the world, since a lot of it does rely on blind soul charging, and if you get unlucky and you soul charge a bunch of triggers that are grade 0, then you might not be able to add up to the 13 that you need. But if you are able to pull it off, it can be a pretty powerful skill, especially going first, since your opponent will still be at grade 2 at that point, and you know, no parts of his abilities are locked behind your opponent being grade 3. So you can go full force against a grade 2 Vanguard if you manage to get the soul set up properly. So yeah, it requires a little bit of setup on your part, but if you can pull it off, it is a pretty powerful skill. So that is the Ride deck. Moving on to the main deck. First off, for the grade 3s, we have 4 copies of Favrneel's new form, Purgatory Great Dragon Emperor Favrneel Rheingold. So he has a continuous ability that says during your turn, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and your soul has a Purgatory Dragon Deity Favrneel, all of your front row units get power plus 10,000, and this unit gets critical plus 1. So this is an upgraded version of OG Favrneel's ability, giving an extra 10k to your entire front row instead of just himself, and still giving himself the extra crit as well. Also, this ability is not locked behind you not riding this turn, which most of the time you still want to not ride anyway. I'll get a little bit more into that later. But as you can see, this card does have the Persona Ride icon, and it's not restricted to only one copy in the deck like OG Favrneel is, since we are running 4 of it. So you can actually do a standard normal ride of this card from hand if you want, and still have this first ability be online. But ideally you want to go into this card a different way, which we'll get to here in a second. But yeah, being able to power up your entire front row is very helpful. Helping you hit much better numbers with those 2 rear guard columns is definitely a very welcome thing in this deck. And this ability can stack, of course, with a Persona Ride, which we do have a few ways to get off in this deck. So you can definitely pump up your front row to some pretty massive numbers. So again, he also has 3 auto abilities. First one says at the beginning of your main phase, you choose a card from your drop, put it into soul, and choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So again, very similar to OG Favrneel, letting you pick off one of your opponent's rear guards for free every turn. However, now you get to choose instead of your opponent, so you do have a bit more control over what you take away from your opponents, which is always nice. However, this ability is much better in the fact that it can just put a card from your drop into your soul, as opposed to OG Favrneel putting one from hand into your soul and letting you draw to replace it. So that's helpful in a few ways, one of which is it lets you go through your deck a little bit slower. So deck out isn't quite as big of an issue as it was before. And also, you get a little bit more control being able to grab anything from your drop to get into your soul. You can grab something that you guarded with earlier. If you guarded with a copy of Squalid Freaks, you can put it in the soul to get the extra 4 grades in there. If you discarded something for a perfect guard like a grade 3 and you want to shove it in, or something you discarded for your ride deck earlier, you can shove it in. That can be very helpful. Much better than having to put one from your hand into soul and draw, since you didn't always have something in your hand that you wanted in your soul, or anything in your hand that you wanted to give up at that point. So being able to just grab it from drop is a lot more intuitive and easy to set up some key pieces in your soul. So then he also has his second auto ability that says once per turn, at the end of the battle this unit attacked, if the sum of the grades of Dark States cards in your soul is 13 or greater, you can counterblast 2 or put a card with Favrneel in its card name from hand into soul to stay in this unit, and it gets drive -1 until end of turn. So pretty much the exact same skill as OG Favrneel, letting you restand him with the 13 grades in your soul. However, it does now have an alternate cost. You can either counterblast 2 or put an extra copy of Rheingold into your soul. So that does make it much easier to be able to pull off that restand more consistently. If you are lacking in the face-up damage departments, you can just shove another copy of Rheingold in there. Now that will turn this ability from a +1 into a +/-0, since you're losing a card from hand and gaining an extra drive. However, those extra copies of Rheingold in your hands aren't super useful, other than, it being like discard fodder or something. So losing out on a copy of Rheingold in your hand isn't a huge deal in order to get that ability off. Plus, by putting another copy of this card in the soul, that is 3 more grades in there, which the skill does check the sum of the grades before you pay the cost. So if you're at like 11 or something, and putting a Rheingold into your hand would get you across the threshold through the 13, you actually won't be able to do that, since you have to already have the 13 grades set up before you pay this cost. So it doesn't help in that regard, but it does help pump up that grade count even further if you want to, like bind out a copy of Squalid Freaks from your soul or something. That can help, keep that grade count high. So overall, just a very powerful skill. And then lastly, he has his final auto ability that's active when he's in your soul. That says at the end of your turn, if your Vanguard is Purgatory Dragon Deity Favrneel, you ride this card as rest. So this ability lets you superior ride Rheingold directly from your soul during the end phase of hopefully turn 3, if you can get him in there by then. Which the point of this ability means that you can already be on Rheingold when you go into turn 4. So you'll be set up for your big play that turn without having to actually ride that turn. So getting the superior ride during your end phase as opposed to just normal riding it during your ride phase will allow you to get your big plays off turn 4 while not turning off any of your abilities that require you to have not ridden that turn. So that is the ideal way to go into this card. Hopefully you can find it and get it set up in your soul during turn 3 and go ahead and get that superior ride off. If you can't and you like draw into it during your draw phase of turn 4 or something, you can just normal ride this card on top of OG Favrneel, and it'll be fine. It's just any of those, if you didn't ride skills won't be active for that one turn. Again, like I mentioned before, this card does have Persona Ride. So if you superior ride into this card during turn 3 and you have another copy of it in your hand, you can also just do a normal Persona Ride from your hand of this card. But again, that will turn off your did not ride abilities for that turn, and also take away a Favrneel in your hand that you could potentially use for the cost of his second auto ability. So most of the time, the ideal thing to do with this card is to superior ride the one copy from your soul. Try to avoid normal riding it from hand. You can kind of as a fallback if you need to. But ideally, to activate Persona Ride, you want to either use your Regulus piece or Herodis's ability in order to get that Persona Ride active via their effects, and keep those extra copies in your hand for potentially paying his cost, as opposed to just doing a standard Persona Ride. But the option is there for either one, depending on the situation, what you need to do. But yeah, overall a pretty cool upgrade for Favrneel, definitely making your offense that much better, powering up your entire front row, and just making things a little bit more smoother as far as your overall game plan goes. So next up for the grade 3s, we have 3 copies of Demonic Swordsman of Writhing, Eligos. So he has his auto ability that says when this unit attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Vanguard with Favrneel in its card name, you can put one other rearguard into your soul to choose one of your opponent's rearguards, retire it, and if the sum of the grades of Dark States cards in your soul is 13 or more, you countercharge 1. So this is the countercharger for the deck. Pretty useful card, not as vital as he was before, since again we have that alternate cost with Rheingold's ability. So not as important, but still useful to have that countercharging option. If you don't have an extra copy of Rheingold in your hand, you might definitely need it. Now this ability is a -1 to you, but it also minuses 1 your opponent, so it's kind of a break even in that regard since you are shoving a rearguard into your soul. But again, that does get another card into your soul, so that can increase your grade count. If you draw into Rheingold somehow after you've already used OG Favrneel's main phase ability, you can just call Rheingold as a rearguard and attack with him, and then use this skill to shove Rheingold into soul. So that can be an alternate way to get him in there. It can get a copy of Squalid Freaks in there if you want to use his ability later. So a versatile skill, being able to, set up your soul via your rearguards, while also picking off one of your opponent's rearguards, which again will trigger OG Favrneel's, on retire ability as well, to potentially get even more cards into your soul. So not as vital as he was before, but still a pretty important card for the deck. Next up, we got 4 copies of Purgatory Baron Herodis. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says at the end of the battle, this unit attacked a Vanguard. If you have a Vanguard with Favrneel in its card name, you can put this unit into your soul to choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So once again, this is a 1-for-1 since you're minusing 1 yourself in order to -1 your opponent. But just like with Eligos, it can trigger OG Favrneel's on retire ability, and it sets this card up in your soul in order for you to be able to use his second auto ability that's active in the soul. That says at the beginning of your ride phase, if you have a Vanguard with Favrneel in its card name, you can bind this card and discard a card from hand To activate Persona Ride, and until end of turn, you cannot activate Persona Ride with other card effects, and you cannot ride. So this is the primary way to get your Persona Ride active in this deck. Just like a standard Persona Ride, it is a ±0, since you do have to discard a card from your hand, and then you get to draw off the Persona Ride. So you will break even in that regard, but it will give you the extra 10k to your front row, which of course stacks with Rheingold's power up, so that can be a total of 20k to your entire front row, 25k if you use Squalid Freak's ability that turn as well. So definitely helpful in getting that front row pumped up to some very large numbers. Now he does have to bind himself out of your soul in order to use this ability, so again that is losing 3 grades out of your soul. So, you know, don't end up getting yourself under the 13 and not being able to get back up to it if you use this skill. But if you have the extra grades in your soul to pull it off, being able to use this as consistently as possible is definitely a good play in this deck, since you want as much power stacked on that front row as you can possibly get. So overall, a very important card. So next up, we got 2 copies of Execution Dragon Vorpal Scythe Dragon. So he has an activate ability that says once per turn, you can Soul Blast 2 to choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So this ability is kind of just there in case you end up like accidentally soul charging a bunch of grade 0s or something. Those grade 0s don't help you at all just sitting in your soul, since they don't contribute towards the 13 grades that you need. So you can just Soul Blast out those grade 0s in order to get rid of one of your opponent's rear guards, which once again will trigger OG Favrneel's on retire skill. So it's just an option to, you know, use up any triggers that you happen to soul charge blindly. And then he also has his auto ability that says when this unit's attack hits, you may soul charge 2. So a nice pressure ability as well. He can hit anything to get this ability off. He doesn't have to hit a Vanguard, so you can attack into a rear guard if you want. And if it hits, it'll trigger Favrneel's on retire ability again, and give you that extra soul charge too as well. So it is a blind soul charge, so again the RNG factor is there, but helping you build up that soul and hopefully get the grade count you need is always a helpful thing. So then lastly, for the grade 3s, we just have 1 copy of our Nationless Normal Order Regulus piece, Gradius Greydall. So it is a Regulus piece, so you can only have 1 of it in your deck and use it 1 time in a fight. And there's no cost to play it, and its ability just says that you can play this if you have a grade 3 Vanguard with Persona Ride and you did not ride this turn, and it lets you activate Persona Ride. So just another option in order to get that Persona Ride more consistently if you don't have Rhodus set up, or you don't want to lose the 3 grades in your soul to use Rhodus's skill. If you have this in your hand, you can just use this instead and still get that Persona Ride. It will work with either form of Favrneel. So just a nice backup option in order to get that more consistently. Now, it is kind of player preference which Regulus piece you want to run. If you'd rather replace this with Forbid All in order to search out some of the grade 3 rear guards from the deck, you can go that route. Or you can even use Radiance Caliburn as well for the extra draw power or resource recursion. So it's pretty much whatever you want to do, but I do prefer sticking with this one. So that is all the grade 3s. Moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we do just have 3 additional copies of Squalid Freaks in order to set up as many of those as possible into the soul in order to get that grade count up and potentially reuse his ability multiple times. So next we have 4 copies of Steam Gunner Tizcar. So she has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this card is put on Guardian Circle from hand or discarded from hand while riding from the ride deck, you can Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. So with this ability, it's got the optional cost, but you always want to go with the Energy Blast cost, usually, since, you know, you want to save your Counterblast for Favrneel's skills. And nothing else in this deck uses energy, so you shouldn't have, you know, any problems in that regard. But this is just a nice ability letting you make up for losing this card. Basically, if you guard with it, you can use this to draw a card to replace her in your hand. If you discard her for your ride deck early game, again, she lets you draw to replace it. So just a nice card in helping maintain the size of your hand, which this deck needs all the help it can get in maintaining its hand size. So any usages of this ability is always nice. So then she also has her second auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rear guard circle, if you Persona Road this turn, you can Counter Blast 1 or Energy Blast 3, and you may Soul Charge 1, and until end of turn, this unit gets boost and power plus 5,000. So once again, the optional cost, once again, you always want to go for the Energy Blast cost, and it just lets you Soul Charge, so again, helping build up that soul. And she gives herself an extra 5k in boost for the turn, so she can become a 15k booster or attacker if you need her to be. Now, this ability does only last for the one turn that you called her, so for every turn after that, she is just a vanilla 10k on the board, so that's not super great. But if you have her in the front row, you can still intercept her away. Or if you have Elgato out on your board, you can have Elgato shove this into your soul and pick off another one of your opponent's rear guards. And that way you can potentially replace her on your board with something better next turn, while also getting some advantage out of her since you're picking off one of your opponent's rear guards and getting a counter charge as well. But yeah, overall just a very helpful card in keeping your hand size up. So that is actually all the grade 2s we're running, so moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 3 copies of Exaggerate Draco Kid. So he has a continuous ability that's active on Rearguard Circle, Guardian Circle, and in your soul. That says if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this card gets grade plus 2. So the Rearguard Circle and Guardian Circle part of this skill doesn't really matter in this deck. This card is meant to be dual support for Favrneel and Baphomedes. So that part of the skill plays into Baphomedes more so than this deck. But the soul part of the ability is very helpful, turning him into a grade 3 when he's in your soul. So that very much helps you in hitting the 13 grades that you need. And then he also has his auto ability that says when this card is placed on Rearguard Circle, if your soul has a grade 3 card, you may soul charge 1. And if a grade 3 card was soul charged by this effect, then you choose a grade 3 card from your drop and put it into soul. So this ability only works if you already have one grade 3 already set up in your soul, which we have a really high grade 3 counts in this deck, so that shouldn't be too much trouble. But yeah, if you do get that grade 3 set up, this is just an on-call soul charge 1, which of course it is a blind soul charge, so again there's that RNG factor, but if you happen to soul charge a grade 3 off the top of the deck, then you can grab another grade 3 from your drop and put it into soul as well. So it's not the most consistent ability in the world since you're relying on that blind soul charge, but if you do get lucky and soul charge that grade 3, and you grab the other one from your drop, counting the grade 3 that you already have in your soul in order to be able to use this ability in the first place, that's 9 of the 13 grades you need right there, just from this card. So pretty useful ability in helping you just build up that soul faster. Even if you don't soul charge a grade 3 off of this, it's still a soul charge 1, so you'll be getting something out of it, at least. So just a nice card in helping the deck's consistency overall. So next up, we got 3 copies of Steam Battler Gungnam. So his auto ability says when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, you soul charge 1. So again, just another blind soul charging ability. And then he has his activate skill as well that says once per turn, you can soul blast 3 and draw a card. So again, this ability is mostly there for if you blind soul charge a bunch of grade 0s. Those don't help you in your soul, so you can blast those out and turn into some card advantage instead. Which, again, this deck needs all the help it can get in that regard. So having some kind of drawing option can be helpful. If you don't blind soul charge many triggers, you might not use this skill real often, but it is there when you need it if you get unlucky with those soul charges. So next up, we got 3 copies of Brainwash Swirler. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one, when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, soul charge 1. So same ability as Gungnam, just giving you another blind soul charge. And then his second auto ability says when your card is put into your soul by soul charge, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So a nice power up ability as well. This card can hit some pretty large numbers if you chain together a lot of your soul charging abilities. Just calling him during turn 3 or later automatically gives you 1 extra soul charge and 1 5k. I usually like saving Flaming Pony to turn 3, and if I have this card, I call it out. And that gives me 1 soul charge from his skill, and then 2 more from Flaming Pony. So that'll be at least an extra 15k to this card. So he can be a big booster, he can be a big attacker if you need it. So just a nice offensive card in the deck, as well as helping with building up that soul resource. So the only other grade 1s we have are our Sentinels. So first off, we have 3 copies of Repelled Malice Dragon, just your standard perfect guard, as well as 1 copy of the Nationless Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude, the original version that you can play without paying the cost if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s, we just have our trigger lineup, which is 7 crits, 4 fronts, 4 heals, and 1 over. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Diabolos Girls Mai Mai, just your vanilla crit. Additionally, we have 3 copies of Stem Deviate Dragon. So he has his auto ability, says at the end of the battle this unit boosted, you can put it in your soul, choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 2000 until the end of the turn. You don't really ever use this ability in this deck. Putting a grade 0 into your soul doesn't really help you much, so the skill isn't really used. If you want to run 4 of this and 3 of the vanilla, you can, but it doesn't make much difference. So next for the fronts, we have 4 copies of Diabolos Girls Natalia. So her continuous ability, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, this unit gets shield plus 5000. So your 20k shield front trigger. Very helpful in getting a little extra defense. So then for the heals, we have 4 copies of Diabolos Girls Ariana. So just the vanilla heal. Of course, as always, if you want to run any effect heals, you can feel free to do so. And then lastly, our 1 over trigger is Hades Dragon Deity of Resentment, Galmage Held. So his additional effect says you get, during your return, all of your Vanguards get power plus 10,000, critical plus 1 until end of this fight. So grants an ability to you, the fighter, giving your Vanguard basically a permanent crit trigger, extra 10k, and an extra critical. So very nice ability in this deck, especially since we have a restanding Vanguard. If you get lucky and check into this early, then that will make all of your Vanguard attacks for the rest of the game very threatening, since this will stack with the extra power and crit that Favrneel gains from his own ability as well. So having a 3 crit restanding Vanguard is definitely very dangerous. So very, very powerful skill. So that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our 1 fight with it. And I think we'll fight Gosetsu. And we won the rock, paper, scissors, so we will choose to go first. And let's see, I think I'll put that heal back, but keep the crit. Just have a little defense. Alright, so we're going to discard Protus, because we won't be able to use Tizcar's ability right now since we don't have any energy. So then we'll just end our turn. And he had to clone the Tizcar as well, so he will get the Energy Blast 3 and draw. And I'm actually going to let this one through. Oh, and he gets a crit trigger right off the bat. And we get a crit as well, but it is wasted, unfortunately. And we get a front trigger that is also wasted. Alright, so now we can discard Tizcar to ride Squalid Freaks. and used his car's ability to Energy Blast 3. And we will draw our heal. Come on. Alright, so now we'll just go ahead and attack.
Vanguardにアタック。ノーガード。ドライブチェック。ダメージチェック。ドロートリガー。
And he gets a draw trigger.
ターンイン。俺のターンだ。ドロー。ライト。スキル発動。
And he'll get the superior call inroad shooter out from his soul, which gains 2k and intercept. So I'm gonna let this one through.
Damage check. Vanguardにアタック.
And we're gonna have to overguard a little bit there, but we'll guard with that heal.
God.
Alright, so we'll discard one of these Elgoses. Right, Favrneel. And then his ability will activate. And my opponent gets to choose one rear guard to retire, but he only has one, so we'll take out his inroad shooter. And now trigger Favreneel's other ability to let us put a card from hand into soul. So we'll shove Vorpal Scythe in there. And then we draw another heal. Alright, so now we're going to call Brainwash Swirler over here. And we'll use his ability to Soul Charge one, which was a grade 1. And that triggers his other ability to gain 5k. And then from our soul, we're going to go ahead and activate Flaming Pony's ability. So we'll bind him. And Soul Charge 2. And we got a grade 3 and a grade 1 that time. And that triggers Brainwash Swirler 2 more times. So he gains another 10k. So then we'll call Gunram. And we'll go ahead and plop him behind the Vanguard. And his ability lets us Soul Charge one more time. And we got lucky and Soul Charged Rheingold that time. Very nice. And we also give Brainwash Swirler another 5k. So let's check our soul. We got Rheingold in there now, so that sets up our superior ride for later. And we have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We have exactly 13 grades, which is what we needed. So we're going to go ahead and call Elgos over here. And I'm going to move Brainwash Swirler up. And then we can go ahead and attack. So let's see, I am going to attack with Favrneel first, not boosted. And we'll get a heal trigger, which we do get. So we will heal that copy of Rheingold. And we're going to give that power to Elgos.
Power plus. Drive check. Over trigger.
And we checked our over trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and give that power to Elgos as well. And Favrneel gains 10k and a crit for the rest of the game. And he gets a heal that he does not get. So now we can use Favrneel's ability since we do have the 13 grades in our soul, so we counterblast 2.
スキル発動
And restand our Vanguard, who can attack once again with 1 drive, and we're going to boost him this time
ヴァンガードにアタッ
for
ク
31,002 crit.
ガードド
And
ラ
he
イブ
guards.
チェック
Alright, so now we're going to attack with Rainwar
ヴ
Swirler.
ァンガードにアタックガードだ
And he guards again. So then we'll attack with
ヴ
Elgato.
ァンガードにアタック
And I'm going to go ahead and use his skill here, even though he doesn't have any regards to retire. Flagberg's ability is going to pick apart our board anyway. So we'll use Elgato and we'll just shove Rainwar Swirler into Soul.
スキル発動
And we can go ahead and get that counter charge.
ノーガード
We're going to be losing that rear guard next turn anyway. Might as well get something out of it.
ターンイン
So now that's our end phase, we can activate Rheingold's ability from our soul.
スキル発動スペリオルライ
And Superior Ride.
ドロー
So we're set up for next turn.
コールコールヴァンガードにアタックだ
And he could not build much of a board at all. So we'll guard that one with that heat.
ガード ほらスキル発動
Now Inlight Pulse will restand.
ほらスキル発動パワープラスヴァンガードにアタックだ
So yeah, he's only going to get 3 attacks this turn. So we actually won't be losing our rear guards. So let's see. I will guard this one as well.
ガード ヴァンガードにアタックだほらスキル発動
And all he got out of that was a draw since he only managed to get 3 attacks. So I'll let that one through.
ノーガードドライブチェックドライブチェックダメージチェックターンエンドスタンド&ドロー
Alright, so now we can go ahead and use the ability of Herodis in our soul. So we'll bind him and discard 1. So let's see, we'll drop... we'll drop that crit, I guess.
スキル発動バインペルソナライ
To activate Persona Ride. So we draw and give 10k to our front row. So then we can just end the phase without riding. And now that will activate Rheingold's ability at the beginning of our main phase. So we can put a card from our drop into our soul. So we're going to go ahead and grab this other copy of Herodis. And then retire his 1 rear guard. So let's see, I'm going to call another Brainwar Swirler.
コール
And trigger his ability to allow Soul Charge.
スキル
Which triggers
発
his
動
other ability to gain 5k.
パワープラス
And then, let's see, we'll call Exaggerate Draco Kid over here. Which triggers his ability. Soul Charge again. And we Soul Charge to grade 1, so we don't get to grab one from our drop. But we do get to give Rainwater Swirler another 5 And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and call Vorpal Scythe as well. So let's check our soul. So we've got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 19 grades in our soul. Wow. So we are more than set up. So I think we are good to go. So we will go ahead and attack with Favrneel first, not boosted.
Vanguard.
And since we got a surplus of grades, we can go ahead and use Squalid Freak's ability from our soul, so we'll bind him. And our front row gains another 5k. As he perfect guards. And we get a front trigger on top of that. And a crit trigger too, wow. So, let's see, I'm going to give both of those effects to Eligos. And now we can use Rheingold's ability to counter blast too. To restand him, and we can attack once again, boosted this time for a whopping 66,003 crit, plus 1 drive. Oh, he's got to let it through. So we should have him here, because he's at 4. Oh, he got a heal, which he does get. But he's gonna need another one. Oh, and he got his over trigger! Come on! So he did manage to survive that. And now he's at 100 million power, so despite our rear guards hitting huge numbers, we still won't be able to hit anything. So we're gonna have to just go ahead and end our turn there, unfortunately. And use this energy generator to energy blast 7 and draw. And he built a much better board this time, so he should get his full 5 attacks. So, let's see, I'm going to guard that one with Tizcar. And we can go ahead and use her ability to Energy Blast 3. And draw. And let's see, we will... I think I'll let that one through. And we get a crit trigger. So he's going to have to attack into our rear guards here because it can't hit our Vanguard, so I'm going to just let that one through Tsu. And I'll let that through as well. He's going to get to retire 2 of our rear guards with flag burst skill too, so our board's getting decimated here, but oh well. Put Prize Trident into Soul to countercharge. So, let's see, I'd had to guard with 3 or more because of his guard restrict. And I kind of need the extra damage. But if he gets a crit, I'll be screwed. But you know what, we'll take the chance anyway and let it through. And no crit, nice. And now Inlet Pulse can go into his soul and he can draw. Alright, so once again we'll activate Herodis' skill from our soul, so we bind him. And then we can discard, we'll drop Squalid Freaks. To activate Persona Ride. And then just end the ride phase. And then Rheingold skill. Let's just put one from drop to soul, so we'll shove that Squalid Freaks we just discarded in there. And take out his last rear guard. So, let's see, let's check the soul again. So, we got 4, 10, 11, 12, 16 grades in our soul. So, we've got enough where we can spare a few, so I'm going to use Gung Ram's activate ability. And we'll Soul Blast our grade 0 and 2 grade 1s. To draw one. And unfortunately we only have one good rear guard to call, so we're just going to pluck down Herodis. And that is all of the board we can build right now, really, unless we want to call a trigger. So we'll have to just attack with this. So attack with Rheingold first, not boosted. And I'm actually not going to use Squalid Freaks right now, since we only have one other card in our front row. Perfect guards. And we get a front trigger. So now we'll use Rheingold's ability. And we'll go ahead and just counter blast too. To restand and attack one more time, boosted this time, for 61,003 crit, plus 1 drive, and again we're not going to use Squalid Freaks. And he dropped a whole lot for 1 to pass. And we got a crit trigger! So we're going to give that to Rheingold, and we'll bust through his guard with a whopping 4 crit attack. So yeah, that should definitely get him. And yep, we got him with that one.
これが僕のヴァンガードだ。
So there you go, that was my Favrneel deck. Pretty fun deck. I do like the way this plays. I still wish it did have a little bit more draw power. But the nice boost of Rheingold letting you hit some very, very huge numbers is very fun. So anyway, I'll be back soon with more deck profiles. I think next up I'm actually going to jump over to vintage format and do my vintage Alfred Royal Paladin deck. So that should be pretty fun. But anyway, until then, I guess that's all for this video. So, lots of luck to you and yours.